Hi there, my name is Jack Wallen, and I'm here again to talk to you about something. This subject just so happens to have been requested. And you know me, I'm gonna oblige because I'm here to help. Now, I need to mention something before I really get going. Yesterday, I had to box up my DJI LiDAR. The LiDAR is the radar, the detector, that what it does is it controls the focus motors on my gimbal to add autofocus to my cinema camera. It died. Oh boy. Which is interesting because about 6 months ago, I had to send my gimbal off to get it fixed because it died. Quality control much? I don't know. Anyway, so if I go in and out of focus, I apologize. I'm going to try to not lean forward or go too far back. So there we go. I have to look at my little monitor right there and see that there's a red outline on my glasses, which tells me that my face is in focus. Not that you really want my face to be in focus, because look at it. Okay, so what am I going to talk about? Let's actually get to it, okay? So, how do you make a living as a writer? That's a tough question. Now, I want to say this. It's not easy. It's not for everybody. And there is absolutely zero guarantee that you will be able to make a living as a writer. And if you do, there's no guarantee that you will be able to continue making a living as a writer. Yeah, but let's think about it this way. What profession in the world actually has job security right now? I can't think of any. Everyone I know, everyone, worries about losing their source of income. Every one of them. And as a writer, well, yeah. Now, to answer this question, I need to give you a bit of backstory. I know. Boring. It starts around 1999, which I call the year of Prince. I had to take a hiatus from acting. I was going through a divorce, and my life was fairly tumultuous. And I needed something that didn't draw on my emotional well-being. So I stepped back from the stage and I said, what am I going to do? I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. And on a whim, even though I already had a master's degree, I went back to school, went back to college. And I enrolled in, drum roll please, Computer Information Systems, Yahoo! And here's the thing. I had already taught myself the Linux operating system, and back then the Linux operating system was really challenging. So when I walked into that program, I already had a head up, a leg up, or whatever. A foot in the door to technology. I knew it well. And so my knowledge of technology kind of caused some problems, because I would be in class. For example, I had to take a class on Microsoft Office. So in that class, I had to frequently correct my teacher, because the teacher was, well, teaching the wrong things. I'd raise my hand and say, I'm sorry, but this is actually how you do that. And then I walked into the chairman of the department and had a brief and frank discussion with him, asking why they weren't teaching the Linux operating system. And the answer was, because it doesn't have market share. I looked at him and I said, you're going to regret this. One of these days, Linux is going to power everything. And you are essentially going to be graduating people that know nothing about it. Good luck with that. It just so happens on that same day, I went to a meeting. I was a member of a LUG, a Linux users group. I went to the meeting and I was thrilled to tell everybody that I had managed to get Diablo running on Linux. And they were all like, ooh, wow. Well, I didn't realize this, but there was somebody there at the meeting from a new website. This was during the .com, the rise of the .com bubble, the inflation of the .com bubble, as it were. And this gentleman said, we're looking for someone who's willing to write for us to help build a Linux website. I shot my hand up in the air and I said, I'm your guy. Because I was frankly tired of the program that I was in. And I didn't want anything to do with it because it was too basic, wasn't teaching the right things, and I was bored. So we had a quick talk about Linux and what I knew about it. And he was like, yeah, let's do this. So the day after that, I was sent a contract. And I was a freelance writer all of a sudden. And back then, it was, as I said, it was the .com bubble. And they were paying me a lot of money to write these articles. Let me put it into perspective here. Back then, 1999, this website was going to pay me $4,000 a month to write 4 articles. Each article about 1,200 words. Well, at first I thought, okay, well, I really need to prove myself, so I'm going to work very hard at this and make sure I get it all right. And eventually, after I kept doing that for a while, I realized that I had a knack for it, that I was actually pretty good. Now, I had already written short stories and poetry and theses. I had written and defended my monograph in grad school. So I could write. And eventually I started thinking, they're only wanting me to write 4 articles a month. So I'm going to hold off until the last week of the month and write those 4 articles. And the other 3 weeks, I can do whatever the heck I want. Fun times. And that's what I did for a while. And eventually I got another call, a ringy-dingy, from one of the editors-in-chief of this website. And they said, we want to bring you on full-time because we love your work. And I said, well, and they said, here's how much we're going to pay you to do this all the time. And I said, let me think about it. Yes. Because it was the most money I had ever heard, ever. I mean, remember, I was an actor. I was an actor making about 14 grand a year and living off of it. I was single, rent was cheap. I was living in a town where everything was inexpensive, so it was possible, it was feasible. But the idea of making that much money to do something that I was starting to really enjoy blew my mind. So I said, yes, of course I would. And I did that for quite a while. I did working in an office work. Like I had a desk, I had an office, I had a name plaque, I had a title. I was an editor-in-chief of Linux content. Whoop-de-woo. So I did that for a while, as I said, until the call of my artistic soul became too loud to ignore. And I went back to acting because I had to do it. I had to. I did that for another, I don't remember how long, quite a while. But at the same time, I was like, I can supplement my acting income by writing. And then I thought, okay, Actors Equity Association has a really crappy retirement plan. I need something to retire on. So I thought, I'm going to write books. Yeah. Innocently thinking, I can do this. I can make a living writing books. Woo to the who. So I wrote my first book. Here's how it went. On the company that brought me to Louisville, Kentucky, where I live, was a theater for young audiences. And it was one of the biggest theater for young audiences in the country. So I was working 9 months on and 3 months off. And during those 3 months off, I thought, well, I need to keep my creative juices flowing, so I'll write a book. And that's kind of how it went for a while. I would do 9 months of acting, 3 months of writing, 9 months of acting, 3 months of writing, until eventually I developed a pretty good knack for very quickly writing books. While at the same time, I continued keeping my toe a little bit wet in the technical world so I can keep writing for that. And it went pretty well for a while. And then the company I was with kind of made some drastic changes. They got rid of the rep company, of which I was a part of. I was in the rep company for 10 years. And I finally realized, oh no, I can't make a living as an actor anymore here in town. I just married a woman with kids. Can't really leave this place. What am I gonna do? So I went and became a hairstylist. And that lasted for about 3 years, and then I did something else. I made a big mistake, and I joined a PC support company. It was awful. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. But here's the thing. Halfway through my stint as a PC support company, I decided I'm going to go back to writing tech articles. So I did that while I was also doing the other thing. I was double dipping essentially. But it kept my ties to that world. And while I was doing that, while I was miserable at that job, I realized I've got to do something. I can't take this. I do not work well in corporate America because I am just adamantly opposed to a lot of the practices that I saw happening in the world of business. So I thought, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get away from this? So I thought, okay, I know how to write technical articles. I'm going to find more clients. I'm going to find enough clients to make up for the money that I'm making at this PC support company. So I started throwing out my resume everywhere I could and realized that I got a lot of interest. And here's why. Because I had become an expert in something that was considered niche-y, but it was a niche that was growing exponentially. And I saw the writing on the wall. I knew that at some point, this operating system that I had taught myself how to use was, in fact, as I said to that chairman of the department at that school, was going to power the world. And that's where we are now. So essentially what I did was I found this thing that I could become an expert in on my own terms. And I did that. And I used that to market myself as a writer. And people were coming to me at some point wanting me to write for them. And that branched out to other things because all of a sudden I realized, well, I can write about this, so surely I can write about that. And then all of a sudden I realized there were all sorts of subjects that I could cover under the umbrella of technology. And all the while, I'm also writing books and selling books. So eventually, I realized that I was making enough money to quit everything else and just be a full-time writer. And that's how it's been for the last 15 years. And I'm here to tell you that as soon as I made the transition to full-time writer, my quality of life improved exponentially because I was doing something that I enjoyed. I was my own boss, essentially, working on my own at my own pace and at home. It was a beautiful thing. But it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't utterly and profoundly determined to get away from that hellscape of a job that I had. But on top of that, it wouldn't have happened had I not taught myself something that I knew at some point in time was going to be utterly and profoundly critical for the world to function. And now you have Amazon, Netflix, Google, you name it. You name a company, and I guarantee you that they're using the Linux operating system for one thing or another. And that became my specialty. Now, you may be thinking, but that's not, does that really count? I mean, really? Aren't we talking about writing fiction for a living? Okay, let me address that. There are not a lot of writers in the world making a living solely at writing fiction anymore. There are some. There are definitely some. There's Stephen King. There's Patterson. There's J.K. Rowling, which I don't really want to talk about because... And there are all sorts of other writers. Not all sorts. There are some other writers out there who make a living, a very good living. The A and B list writers make a living doing what they love. Everybody else, C and on down, C struggles. D really struggles. E, nah. E's lucky to make enough money to buy a coffee per month. And the reality is that selling books in this world that we live in has become awfully challenging for just about everyone. So, what can you do? Well, the first thing you got to do is write. And I don't mean just write, I mean write. You've got to write a lot. Now, I need to qualify that. About 5 to 7 years ago, all of a sudden, indie writers decided, for whatever reason, that the only way they could succeed was write as many books as they possibly could. And what that generated were a lot of crappy books. And I mean crappy. Like books you would start to read and go, this is awful. It is poorly written. It is not edited well. It's not worth my time. And that went on for a long time, where writers were thinking, I need to write at least 10 or 15 books a year to make this work. And yeah, sure, some of them were succeeding, but think about it. It's hard to, it takes a long time to write a book, from the first draft to editing to proofing to all of it. It takes a long time. I can get a full-length novel written, the first draft of a full-length novel written in 2 months. And that's if it's 60 to 70,000 words. Like my last book was over 100,000 words. So it took me roughly 3 months to write. And I tried it. I think at most, there were like 3 years in a row I was writing 7 books a year. And when that was all said and done, I had to go back and re-edit them because I had rushed them too quickly. It was just not a good situation. And so I finally realized that I'm not keeping this pace up. It's not that I can't keep this pace up. I don't want to keep this pace up because I would rather produce books that are the best I can of very high quality than produce a lot of them. So all of a sudden I switched from quantity over quality to quality over quantity. And what that did was, because I had been writing so many books so quickly for so long, I was still able to write that first draft very quickly. And then everything slowed down for the editing process. And I was okay with that. So I was able to write 5 books a year instead of 7. And it all worked out. But if you are not writing every single day, you're going to struggle. And it's not about quantity, obviously. You've got to write every day to constantly be improving. And that's got to be your goal. If you want to be serious as a writer, if your goal is to eventually make a living as a writer, you've got to take it seriously. That means you've got to concentrate on your craft, and you've got to make time for it every single day. I never miss a day writing. I think in the last 10 years, I have probably missed a handful of days writing. If I go on vacation, I take my laptop with me and I still write. Every night. Doesn't matter. I know it's in my DNA. It is hard-coded in my DNA right now. It is a directive, a prime directive that I have to write. And if I miss a day writing, everything feels wrong. And that's the level that you have to reach if you want to make a living as a writer. You have to take it that seriously. On top of which, you have to find an editor. You have to be able to do that. Because if you start putting out books that are not professionally edited, people are going to read them and they're going to not. It's just not going to work. They're going to see through it. That doesn't mean you need to pay $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for an editor to edit your book. You can find one that's cost effective, but you do have to pay, and that's a big part of the issue. Something that you have to understand. Two things that you have to understand. Number one, you've got to at least give yourself 10 years to make this happen. 10 years. 10. Count them. 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 years. Got to give yourself 10 years. And you have to be willing to spend money, especially at first. You're going to be spending money the whole time. Every time. Now, hopefully at some point you can find a publisher who's willing to pay for the editors and the covers. That's where I am. I have an editor who has put all of their trust in me to the point where I don't have to pitch my books to them. I just write them and send them. If you can find a publisher like that, you're going to enjoy this write a whole lot more. That doesn't mean you're going to sell a lot of books. Just because you get a publisher doesn't mean you're going to sell a lot of books. Repeat that to yourself until you understand it. There is no guarantee. Even if you get with one of the big major publishers, there's no guarantee that you're going to make a living as a writer. I know writers who have been with one of the big publishers who struggle mightily. Who they'll have their agent will sell their book to a publisher. The publisher loves it. Publisher pays to edit it, the cover, everything. Then they publish it and it doesn't sell. And when it doesn't sell, the publisher's like, probably not going to pick you up again. That's just the way it is. It's a hard industry. It is. When I walked away as a professional actor, I thought, there's no way I'm going to find another profession that is harder to make a living at than acting. I did that. I did that very thing. It was harder for me at first to make a living as a writer than it was for me to make a living as an actor. Think about that. So, what I would say to anybody who is considering this as a profession is that you've got to absolutely want to do this. You have to do this. If you don't have to do this, don't do it. I say the same thing when I'm teaching acting. If this is not something you absolutely have to do, don't do it. Because you're going to struggle. Not only you're going to struggle financially, you're going to suffer from crippling doubt and imposter syndrome, and sometimes it just doesn't feel like it ever lets up. So, yeah, you've got to really want this more than anything. Okay, relationships and love notwithstanding, I guess. I mean, you got to want to have a successful family life before this, because you're going to need that support. And that's another thing. Have somebody in your life to serve as support. I'm not necessarily talking about financial support, although that will help quite a bit. but I'm talking emotional and mental support, because this career can be crushing. When you write that book, you finish that book and you think, this is it. This is going to put me on the map. And it gets published and it doesn't put you on the map. I cannot tell you how many times I finished a book and thought, this is the one. And then it doesn't wind up being the one. But I tell myself that every time I finish a book. I told myself that when I finished the first draft of Aftermath, the last book I wrote. I told myself after every book I finished in the Violent Delight series. I always tell myself that, because I need that boost in confidence. And you're going to need those things, because there are going to be a lot of times in this journey where you're thinking, I can't, I got to give up. It's not happening. I don't know if it'll ever happen, so I'm done. You've got to be persistent. You have got to have the persistence of a Jack Russell Terrier if you want to make this work. And I know it sounds so gloom and doom and defeatist and impossible. And yeah, on some days it does feel that way. But on the days you find even a modicum of success, it is glorious. And of course, the definition of success, only you can define. Is success making your first $1 million as a writer? If that's the case, don't do it, because you're going to be disappointed. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but just, you've got to manage your expectations. Give yourself 10 years. And even beyond 10 years, if you're still not succeeding, if you're enjoying the ride, keep going. You might have to have a day job to do it, but it's still worth it. And almost every author I know has a day job. My day job just happens to be writing. So I write fiction and I write nonfiction. The nonfiction pays the bills, and the fiction feeds my soul. It really is that simple. And you have to decide what needs filled the most, your bank account or your soul. Or if you're lucky, you find the way to fill them both up. Just don't always expect your fiction to pay your mortgage. If it happens, then brilliant. I have actually had months where it happens. I've also had months where it doesn't happen. It's not even close to happening. Because essentially I'm at the whim of readers. I'm at the whim of algorithms. And it's hard. But I will never give up. I will write until I'm dead. That, my friends, is the truth. There is nothing that will ever keep me from writing so long as I have a functioning brain and typey fingers. And even if I don't have typey fingers, I can do speech to text, even though I hate that. If I had to, I would. So I take care of my fingers. I really do. I take care of my fingers. I stretch them, exercise them, whatever, and I take care of this. You've got to do those things. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally. And if you do that, you will have an easier time with your craft. And if you always are practicing your craft and always getting better, you'll have an easier time making a living at it. Even though it is a crapshoot. And that, my friends, is how you can possibly, maybe, make a living as a writer. Now you have to ask yourself, do I have the fortitude to make that happen? Find yourself a niche. Find yourself a non-fiction niche that you can focus on, that you can make your own, that you can market. and write about it and write about it and write about it and write about it until you get noticed. And once you've done that, then maybe you could start making money as a nonfiction writer, which will supplement your fiction writing. Anyway, thank you so very much for sitting here with me when I'm going in and out of focus. I apologize. Hopefully I'll have my LiDAR back in a week or so, and I won't have to constantly be looking at my monitor instead of your face, because I love looking at your face because it's so pretty. Anyway, thank you so very much for spending a little bit of time with me. I hope that I've helped you. I hope that I've answered your questions without scaring you off, because I want to be honest with you. I don't want to paint a picture that's not real and honest. So there you have it. Thank you again. And I hope that you and everyone you know and love have a wonderful, wonderful day.